Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Polyglot Software Development Podcast. Our guest today is Jesse Flores. Jesse is the Chief Web Pro at Super Web Pros. Jesse is a founder of Super Web Pros and is a pioneer in AI implementation who created smart sites, websites with integrated AI agents that transform customer interactions and business intelligence. Jesse, thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Yeah, Chris, super happy to be here. Thank you.
I know I gave a brief introduction, but if you could just introduce yourself to our audience, a little bit about yourself and your company, and then we can jump into the topic.
Yeah, great. No problem. Yeah, so my name is Jesse Flores. As you said, I'm founder of Super Web Pros, and we've been a web development agency now for quite a little while. I actually kind of started it on accident when I, kind of got stuck in Michigan. And it turned out to be a pretty successful business and is continuing to be so. But, you know, as everybody's aware, over the last couple of years, AI has really taken the world by storm. And our industry is no different. In fact, one of the things you'll see almost everybody say in a demo is like, we'll build a website with AI, right? And what they usually mean is like they're going to go into ChatGPT and say, I want, a landing page, and the AI will make it for them. And that's cool as far as things go. But the real power of AI isn't just that it's a chatbot on OpenAI or ChatGPT, whatever you use. But that these things are getting increasingly good at reasoning, and they're getting increasingly capable at using tools. And a couple of things follow from that in my mind that led to where we are today. One is that before long, within the next probably 18 months or so, there will be more AI agents on the internet than there will be humans. Having said that, the internet will become a place where humans and AI agents co-evolve and coexist for some period of time, potentially indefinitely. But this also means then that the nature of websites and web development also needs to change. You see, because websites right now are built for humans because they're the only ones that have ever been on the internet. But as agents start to become first-class citizens of the internet, they need to be able to use these systems too. And if you look at a typical website, like 85% of the code is built for humans to find it pretty or humans to interact with it. But there's a lot of stuff that happens on a browser and on a web page that really doesn't matter for AI agents, but it matters a lot for humans. And so as we started thinking through these trends, these things that are happening, that AI agents are going to outnumber humans, that they will need to use the internet in a different way, and that humans will still need to be able to navigate websites, we've started to place our bets on on what we call smart sites, which are websites designed for both humans and AI together so that agents can use the things that really make them special while humans are able to still use the things that they need, but then together on the one code base, they'd still be able to interact. So that's who we are, that's what we're doing, and it's a super exciting, interesting, and challenging project.
Jesse, thanks for the introduction. I just want to make sure I'm pulling up the right website. This is your website, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Perfect, right? And we're going to include links to this so folks can actually access, check it out, and reach out to you. Superwebpros.com. Let me stop sharing that for a second and then come back to some of what you said there. Okay, so that was a great introduction, and it actually I have a lot of questions, right? And these are organic based on what you said. It was very interesting. So let me ask you, and I don't shy away from showcasing my ignorance on video, which makes it all the more easier. First thing is you mentioned websites have been created generally for humans to interact with. Before we go into sorry, let me step back here, folks. The topic today, loosely speaking, is going to be AI agent to agent interaction. What are AI agents? How do they transform the web? That's some of the things that Jesse had mentioned. And then we'll probably touch upon agentic AI as well, right? A few topics related to that space, if you will. And anything else that you want to talk about, Jesse, I'm more than happy to chat about that as well.
This is great.
Now, right now, you mentioned, let me and I'm going to rephrase what you just said in my own words and tell me which part I got right and which part I did not get quite right. You said that typically, over the years, up until this point, I should say, the websites have been designed for humans to interact with, right? I'm going and making an appointment at a hairdresser. I just take that as an example because I think in one of the conferences that those are one of the common examples that I've seen people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
The agent is actually able to make the appointments for you, right? Make the phone calls, follow through all the way, and then make those appointments. I have some questions related to what you said, but is this a decent enough example to take to talk further about?
100%, 100%. But just also remember, so you mentioned agents making phone calls. Like agents don't really need to make phone calls if they can talk to each other directly, right? Like phones are like a human construct. We use them to communicate with each other because you and I don't have APIs, right? Like the phone is our API. But agents that are working together, via an agent network don't need to use the phone. So yes, you are directionally correct. I just wanted to pull that out there because even the language we use today, booking appointments, making phone calls, these are things
Oh,
that we do as humans.
fantastic, right? I think you made some great points there. So let me ask this.
Yeah.
Today, let me take a very simple example because, just by way of context, our audience is predominantly sort of folks in the space of engineering, developers, and architects. But in the recent past, we've talked a few other topics, so our audience has grown outside of the core engineering space. And the reason I mentioned that is some of the questions I would have, I'll ask you, and even if I know the answers to some questions, I might still ask you just so people hear it from
Please.
the horse's mouth, if you will, right? So
Mhm.
let's take this example of somebody making an appointment at a hairdresser. How does it happen today? Or maybe how did that
Yeah.
happen 6 months ago? I go to a
Yeah.
website, I go to bubbles.com, I go look up a location, find the phone number. Either I can make the appointment online or some places you cannot. You have to call them. I call, I talk to somebody on the other side, make an appointment for, I don't know, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and then I show up there. Right? Very, very standard process. Before we go
Mhm.
into how that has changed, 1 year down the road, 6 months down the road, how do you see that experience happen at a high level? And then we'll go into the technicalities of it. What do you think the experience is going to look like?
Yeah, great question. I think the way the experience is going to look is going to be I'm going to have my personal assistant, whether it's your Google Assistant, whether it's Siri, whether it's some other app. This is still the area that's going to be that's to be determined. But let's imagine that it's my Google Assistant as an example. Um, I will say I'll say to my assistant, "Hey, I need to get a haircut sometime this week, ideally on Thursday, because I have a present, or ideally before Friday because I have a presentation that day. Can you find and book me an appointment?" Now, that agent will have access to a bunch of things. So, first of all, it may have access to my calendar. So it'll know when I'm available and when I'm not available. So I don't have to like remember whether or not I have a meeting at 3:30 or 4:30 on this particular time. My agent will just know that because it'll be integrated with my calendar. So then the agent will go and discover Bubbles, to use your example. Bubbles is agent, and will say to that agent, I've got, my person needs to schedule an appointment sometime, during this week. Looking at the calendar, it looks like Wednesday afternoon is the best time for that to happen. Do you have any appointments available? That agent will then say, yes, we've got one available at 4:30. Would you like me to book it? That agent will say yes. That transaction will happen, and I will get an alert that I have an appointment now scheduled at 4:30 on Wednesday. It'll show up in my Google Calendar, and that's it. Like I didn't do anything there other than tell my agent, I need this thing done, and here's the parameters that I need this thing done in. I need it done by this time, and the agent takes it from there. So that I think is the kind of experience that we're moving towards in probably the next 18 or 24 months, if not less.
Okay, that's great. So let's break that down, right, step by step. Now, but before we break it down, you explained that experience. The thing I want to make sure I understand correctly is, was a human involved on either side? In other words, you wanted to make the appointment, you actually made that clear to your agent, if you will. Was there a human involved on the side of Bubbles, or was there not a human on that side of the equation as well?
No, I mean probably during a transition period that will be the case, right? Because right now so much infrastructure that's built for humans will have to evolve. But in the near future, no, it would be the Bubbles agent and Jesse's agent working it out together without a human in the loop, unless it's necessary.
Okay, so which kind of takes us to our topic right away, right? Which is agent to agent interaction, so to speak. So, for this to happen, what are the pieces that need to be in place from a technical standpoint, right? Because let me break down the problem to the extent that I can, just really quickly.
Yeah,
Jesse wants to make an appointment at a hairdresser. That's the problem. That's the problem
hmm,
as it can loosely define it. Now,
correct.
Jesse is a human. Jesse lives in a, let's say Jesse lives in San Francisco, right? Location. So the appointment needs to be maybe in the 15-20 mile radius of Jesse, and maybe that's your preference, and that's been established through some means, right? Let's say it's been established somehow. So it's not going to try and find you a Bubbles appointment in Seattle, right? It's going to find you in San Francisco or that area.
Yep.
And then you have certain preferences. You might go to Bubbles, you might go to some other, maybe a fancier place to get that done. So it needs to know your location and the radius from that location that you're generally willing to commute to get your head taken care of. The types of places that you're willing to go to, either through past history, right? Meaning you've gone to Bubbles in the past, or
Mhm.
you might also say you're open to exploring some other places in future. So it's a combination of your prior experience and what you might be willing to go in future as well. And then you need that appointment in the next 3 days because you're going to a conference, you want to get that done. So there's a time constraint. And then there are certain windows of your day that might work for you. So the calendar is available, a bunch of calendars, let's say a federated search across those calendars, and that the agent needs to look at all of that. So now it knows, okay, Jesse needs an appointment in the next 3 days in these windows of time that he's available to go to these places. It's Bubbles or some other place in a 20-mile radius within San Francisco. And now it needs to take that, go find these appointments. If the appointments are available, based on where you actually prefer to go to, it's going to make the appointment. If not, it's going to go to your second choice, the third choice, and so on and so forth. And if not, it's going to come back to you saying, hey, I couldn't find anything in the 20-mile radius, right? That's everything that needs to kind of happen for the experience to be sort of complete, meaning replacing the human element of it, right? Making no compromises. Now,
That's exactly right.
from a technical standpoint, Jesse, can you sort of walk us through everything that needs to happen here incrementally so we can sort of digest it?
Yes. So this, by the way, also is happening in phases. So for any of your listeners that already have Chat GPT Pro model or the Plus model, whatever the enterprise level is, that's what we have. That has OpenAI's operator. Okay. So if for any of your listeners that have that, you can see kind of this directionally starting to happen if you go and you use the Chat GPT operator. Okay. So in today's world, in the world that's beginning this transition, the way that this kind of thing happens is you use something like ChatGPT's operator, and ChatGPT's operator is actually going through a browser and using an experience and using the browser kind of like you or I might use the browser. So it would search, for haircuts near me or whatever that location is, and pull up the search results. It would go and look, and it would click on things and kind of do all that stuff. Right. So that's like today's world. It is the agents are using traditional browsers in order to affect these changes, and it's using a reasoning model on the back end to kind of um, check appointments and availability. Also, because it is all it's using a browser, and all of this information isn't stored or cached yet in a way that it can recall all these things. There's a lot of moments where it's interrupting you and saying, hey, wait, I need your help with this next step. Hey, wait, I need your help with this next step. Hey, wait, I need your help with the next step. Okay. So that's today's world as agents are coming online. And that will probably be the world for the next 12 months, frankly. Now, beyond that, though, so for those of your listeners who are technically inclined, I would encourage you to go search Google's A2A protocol. Okay, so the two things that I would have your technical listeners look at: Google's A2A protocol and Anthropic's Model Context Protocol. Okay, the Model Context Protocol is the set of tooling that allows for agents to use tools and interact with other systems on the internet, or not even on the internet, just any services, microservices, any services with APIs. And then the A to A protocol is like HTTP for agents. So the A to A protocol is designed for agents to be able to discover and interact with each other through their own agent endpoint. So call it website.com/agent, or website.com/agent/v1/agent name, right? Like, those of you that are familiar with REST, you probably have some idea of how that would happen. So the A protocol is most likely going to be the framework through which these agents interact with each other. And this does a couple of things. It exposes what the agent can do, what tools it can invoke, the security parameters around invocation, and allows for agent to agent communication. The model context protocol, on the other hand, is are the utilities allowed and the utilities usable rather by the agent to accomplish these tasks. So I think in terms of the infrastructure, to answer your question, in the short run, it's browser based agents um, using existing infrastructure. You know, and that's why we talk about building websites for humans and agents, because there are a lot of things that are visible to us as humans that like agents kind of struggle with. Modals, iframes, things like this that are really easy for us to use as humans are really difficult for browser based agents to interact with. But as that starts to as we start to evolve this, it'll move to this other protocol, this agent to agent protocol, where they will search, find, discover, and interact with each other in the same way that you or I might go to, I might go to getsnowpal.com or snowpal.com, and like as a human I'm on your website and I'm browsing it. At some point you're going to have ai.snowpal.com, which is where your agent will go and interact, which is where my agent would just go and do research on Snowpal independently of me doing any work or having to look at your browser. And that's a completely different kind of experience. So I think that's
Just
the framework.
this is amazing. I was trying to, you know, make some sort of notes to follow up, but I shared this in my podcast. If I can either listen to the person talking or make notes, I don't do justice both ways. So I try to capture most of what you said there. For what it's not, folks can go back and pause and listen to the recording so they can point to it, right? But let me ask you a few questions there, right? Amazing introduction to those two protocols. The first step is, but in terms of just to play it, trying to sort of be the layman here, there are two agents involved eventually, right? There's an agent on your side, and there is an agent on the other side, correct? A bubbles agent.
Exactly. Yep.
Now, in this simple example, is the expectation that the agent on the other side be created by bubbles? Either they do it themselves or work with a company to get that in place, but that agent is something that they have to make available, right? Just like there's two agents, but you only have control over the agent where you're trying to do the booking and the reservation
Exactly.
or the appointment, but the other agent has to be there for this whole interaction to be complete, correct?
Correct. So smart sites are the bubbles are designed to be the bubbles agent, because you, me, and anybody else is probably going to use ChatGPT's agent, or we're going to use our Google agent or our Siri agent. But that then means there's a whole infrastructure of companies like Bubbles and all of Bubbles competitors and manufacturers, all these other people that are like not going to be discoverable or easily used by AI. So yes, there need to be two agents, and right now, companies like OpenAI are building the universe of agents for you and for me. But these other or these other the other side of that transaction needs to get created too, and that's what smart sites are designed to do.
Which means would there be one agent for hairdressers and salons in general, or would there be one agent per provider, like one for Bubbles, one for Hacketry, and one for somebody else?
I suspect that it'll be both. In the same way that you've got companies like Thumbtack or Grubhub, let's say as an example. So Grubhub is an aggregator of restaurants, right? And so I imagine that Grubhub will have its own agents. They're probably already working on it, frankly, that will allow for um, some form of distribution of which restaurants get picked when and how that all works. I don't know, but like I suspect that there will be a Grubhub agent, right, that aggregates all of these. But there will also be, I'm looking out the window there, like Panera Bread. Like there might be a Panera Bread agent itself, so that the both individual companies will have their agents, but also there will be aggregators. So I think it's going to be a both and, in the same way that the internet has both of these things, right? Like every restaurant, most every restaurant has a website, but then there are places like Yelp, or not Yelp, places like Grubhub or DoorDash that aggregate them.
Okay, makes sense. So, which means the websites, as we are interacting with them today, Jesse, based on what you're telling us here, they will cease to exist slowly but surely in the form that they exist today. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think so. Yes.
And the reason they would exist in the interim is because till those agents exist in entirety, the agent has to interact with the provider's website as though a human would do it. So that website might exist for a little while. But at the point where all of these agents come into existence on all sides, you actually do not even need a website. So that's not going to be, when you start a company, you're not going to be creating a website. You're actually going to be creating an agent in the future.
I think it's going to be both and the reason I think that is because humans are still going to want to do stuff, right? So I think the idea of human uh, agency, not to be confused with AI agency, doesn't go away. In fact, I'm in San Francisco right now. I live in Michigan, but I'm in San Francisco right now, and right over on the road over there, there's this new organization that it's actually not that new, but Sam Altman, the guy that co-founded
Right.
OpenAI, has this other thing that's called World.org. And World.org is a new project that is designed to verify and validate humanity. And that sounds crazy. But what I did is I went into the World, the new World retail stop or shop, and they do some stuff like they take some pictures with, and they have an algorithm to verify that I am in fact a human. And my special fingerprint, which is based on my iris, is stored in a database so that when I, Jesse the human, I'm interacting with the internet, like my humanity will be validated, and I can do human things that only are available to humans, and it'll also add an additional level of security, etc. But then agents and the reason they're doing this is because like they realize there's going to be two lanes on the internet, right? There's going to be the human lane and there's going to be the AI lane. And so yes, I think the websites as we see them today will cease to exist. I don't think they go away completely though, because I think that there will still be something that humanity needs and wants on occasion. um, I don't think we're all gonna be outsourcing everything to our agents all the time. But I think that the topography of the internet will change quite a bit.
I have like so many questions in my mind based on what you just said. I wish I could capture, or there was an agent to capture it so I don't forget those questions. But to the extent I do remember, let me ask this and let me recap along the way to catch people up as well, right? You've said a number of brilliant things there. So, human to human is how the interactions have been happening since the beginning of time. Now,
Yes.
in the recent past, it's been human to AI because you go talk to a chatbot, you're looking for support, you have a bunch of questions you answer before a human comes into play, essentially, right? So, human to AI, if you will. And then you have two. So, I've experienced human to human,
Hmm.
obviously. I've also experienced human to AI. So, let me ask about the other two things, which is AI to human, right? I've not experienced that yet. In other words, AI trying to interact with me, and then AI to AI, which is what we're talking about here as agents, essentially. Can you speak a little bit, if that makes sense, to the last two, which is you talked about AI to AI? We'll come back to it in a second. The third item there is AI to human. What does that mean where you're interacting with AI, but you're actually human?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's still a little bit of a white space. I'll say that. But here's like, for instance, a way I would envision this kind of interaction happening. And these are the kinds of interactions we're trying to decide or design with smart sites, because the smart site is certainly the entry point. But part of what makes our sites, our agentic sites, so powerful is that they are connected to tools because they have the weight of agents behind them, right? So you could envision, and in fact, I'm working on doing this for our own website right now. Um, you could envision an AI to human transaction going something like this. I go to superwebpros.com. I'm trying to figure out if a smart site is a good fit for me. And I have a conversation with the smart site, which you could do today. And at the point that the smart site says, you should really talk to somebody, and find out if this is a good fit. It would book that on my calendar, Jesse's calendar, to have a conversation with you about whether or not this is a good fit. But you could also imagine at the same time, we have a sales agent, an AI, that texts you and says, um, you know, hey, just wanted to confirm a couple of things. Um, as I was reviewing the transcript of your call, and I had a couple of questions, and they might text you and be like, is your number one goal this or that? Like, do you have this kind of information or that kind of information? Maybe what that agent has done under the hood is gone and looked at your LinkedIn profile before the meeting with me and said, okay, based on your LinkedIn profile and what I find on your Facebook, I've got these three other questions. So Jesse doesn't have to think or about those questions or get those questions answered. Like you would just be having a conversation via text message with my agent who is done the research, or probably a couple of agents who have done the research and then now are sending you these texts or maybe even calling you to talk to you about some of these things before you and I actually meet to have a human to human interaction. So I think we're going to see these AI to human interactions be precursors to human interaction in order to make sure that human to human interaction is as productive as it possibly can be.
Okay, makes sense, right? So one of the things I want to ask is, in the earlier example, continuing with this hairdressing appointment, I mentioned, that you have to look up Jesse's calendar, see if he's available, and yada yada yada. Now, when those integrations happen in the context of this AI agent, the first thing I can think of is you're integrating, say, the calendar API, like Google Calendar and other APIs or a bunch of other APIs, so this agent can function. And as a company who we are in the business of building APIs, we have our APIs in AWS. So, but the question is, I'm thinking about a company like us solving related problems. So you First of all, is that correct that this agent depends on a number of APIs provided by these other providers? Jesse, is that a right way to start this thought process?
I think it's directionally correct. So the model context protocol is kind of like APIs for agents. It provides an additional service layer on top of sort of just naked APIs in order to provide some additional agentic tools. But yes, I think it's directionally correct. Agents use APIs to do tasks through
Okay,
the
and then
through model context protocol.
makes sense. And then if you took that a step further, I can see my first thought process is I'm going to build an agent. I'm going to integrate all of these APIs, right? Snowpile API is just one of those APIs, but there's other APIs. Collectively, they provide a set of value add, and then an agent comes into existence. Now, the second part of my question there is, instead of integrating APIs, is it possible that this agent actually consumes information through from some other agent? In other words, I as an AI agent, quote unquote, is not I'm not calling a calendar API that Google provides, but I'm actually talking to a Google agent, and then I get this unstructured response back that I have to make sense of.
Um, Yes. So part of the A to A protocol is designed for that to happen. So, agents. So one of the things that a lot of the hype men about AI agents are like AI agents can do everything. Those of us that actually build them realize like AI agents broadly used are like mediocre at best. Like your best agents are really, really, really specific and are really, really, really specific, and they can do like one thing really, really well, or a small number of things really, really well. So part of the A to A protocol is that they will, yes, there will be this interaction from agent, one agent A working with agent B, 100%. Now, in terms of the unstructured or structured data, I imagine that most data will become semi-structured through model context protocols because agents can also structure unstructured data. I don't know. I'd have to really think about that a little bit more. I don't think unstructured data goes away, but I do think it's more manageable. But also AIs in general, large language models in general, like are pretty good at dealing with unstructured data. So I think what you would see is is that you would know that the data is going to be unstructured, but you want the response to be semi-structured. And so you would provide like a semi-structured or a structured response, even if unstructured data was the input. But I don't know, it's a really good question. I've never really thought through it at a deep level.
No, and I think it makes sense. And just to add to what you said there, right? I had a chat with the CEO of VV8, a vector database company based out of Netherlands, if I remember correctly. I was, for something that you were working on building our next API, we were looking at these vector databases and how to use or which ones would work for us better than others. And that's one, if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend for people to look that. I completely like their product and the way they've gone about documenting and whatnot. So with that said, as the premise, like vector databases, Jesse, the question I want to ask is, as in the given all of this, what that we are discussing here, many years ago, it was predominantly relational databases, right? And then there was the influx of NoSQL databases, and I'm a huge fan of it. For many years, a lot of us have been using that, even when we could actually be using RDBMS. Once you have a way to use NoSQL better, you start of leveraging that. The future, from what I can tell, is something like vector databases, right? Where how data is stored is very, very dramatically different. I mean, would you agree? Like, are you seeing that happen, or do you still see a world where we still have traditional databases like from 20 years ago and NoSQL and vector databases?
Yeah,
Or do you think the future software systems are completely going to be very, very differently built from how they're built today?
I think it's a both and, right? I mean, we use relational databases for a lot of things. We use vector databases for a lot of things. In fact, everything that we store and feed to an agent is used with vector databases. We use NoSQL databases pretty often. I think that, and we use, you know, S3 storage for. I don't think it's like an. I don't think it's an either or. I think what happens is that these systems all evolve to work together, and it's the right tool. It's about right tool for the job, and so our agents, for instance, that we have internally, we have a bunch of agents running internally in our company to do different things. Like they interact via our CRM's APIs, which are all MySQL. But then we also have vector databases for a lot of things for them to get a different flavor of that data. So I think each of these different databases give you a different lens, right? Like, using SQL or NoSQL databases are still really powerful for the use case. But vector databases are better for AI ingestion, and for storage of unstructured data. Yeah, so I think it's really about the right tool for the job. So I think that I think you are. I don't think it's going to be whether or not it's RDBMS or NoSQL or unstructured data in a data warehouse or a vector database. These things all coexist because they all solve different problems. And so, for instance, we have agents in our own company that are connected to, um, let's say, our CRM via APIs, right? And because agents can do things like, make API calls, if I just need some basic information like how many, I want a daily summary of how many projects were completed and how long they took. An agent can query our SQL database and figure that out. But if I want to know something about like why are certain projects off track or are customers happy with the job, well, we index some of those things in a vector database so that I can then converse with that data. So it really depends on on what problem you're trying to solve. It's the right tool for the job.
It makes sense. One of the reasons I asked a question is, some of our watchers or listeners are also Gen Z folks, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for somebody like that, when I graduated years ago, we learned traditional databases, right? Oracle was, just as popular then as I believe it is today. So we started learning that. In that context, Jesse, just sort of a segue from our core conversation, if somebody is wanting to learn how to store data and databases in general, does it make sense for them to understand or learn the traditional databases like RDBMS and NoSQL, or should they actually start with vector databases and then only learn the others if and when there's a need for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, I'm discussing this with my development team right now. Um, you know, there are a lot of predictions that within the next, I don't know, 12 to 25 months, a lot of code, something like 80% of code will be written by AI. I think that, and we're writing a lot of code with AI. It helps a ton. I think, therefore, where humans will add the most value is going to be in um, architecture and coming up with the most creative ways to solve problems. I very much believe in approaching things from a first principle standpoint. So I don't know. I don't really think about the technology as much as I think about if you've got younger listeners who are in this space, where they should be spending their time is understanding what these systems are, how they work, when's the right time to use this tool versus that tool. I would spend a lot more time thinking through the architecture, the 30,000-foot view, the capabilities, and less time on figuring out like the syntax. I don't know. That's my kind of take. I went to school for economics and theology. If you had told me I was going to have an AI company 20 years later, I would have been like, I don't. First of all, I wouldn't have been able to spell AI back then. But I'd never learned. I never learned. Uh, like a specific system. What I did is I invested a lot of time in understanding architecture, and as a result, I was able to do and am able to put together a lot of really interesting solutions, because I kind of understand things at a deep level. So I don't know. That's kind of my perspective on it. I don't know if it's going to resonate with young people. I feel like a lot of times young people just like want the toy and they want to like run with it. But like sometimes you're better off, especially when AI can do so many tactical things. You're better off learning how to be a philosopher. In fact, I was telling so we have a program we work on with Michigan State University, and they were asking me. We were talking with the School of Social Sciences, like, could somebody who's psychology major, learn AI? And I was like, absolutely. Like I studied theology and philosophy, and I think I'm, as good, if not better, than a lot of our developers because like I think about the world in a very different way. And I think studying I would almost say like, look, study philosophy and then go and study architecture because like that's what's going to be really, really, really helpful.
I think you make a great point there because I had a chat about this with somebody else not so long ago. The notion of development, Jesse, I think, in my opinion, is going to change quite a bit, right? I mean, it's not to say that you don't need a computer science degree. You want to go the traditional route, it's completely all right. But I
Yeah.
think, given the fact that the IDEs are able to provide a lot of the help, and the Anthropic co-founder said, Zuckerberg said this not long ago that 30. I think they asked Satya Nadella like a few days ago how much of the code at Microsoft is written by AI. And I think he said, I think Mark Zuckerberg asked the question to Satya Nadella, and he said there's 20 to 30% of the code, right? And it's not only, I think the questions are always about how much code is written by AI, but I think the more interesting question is the type of people, the type of person who's writing code is not, in my mind, going to be a traditional engineer slash developer. Like, I graduated, learned programming, started coding, and that's all I've been doing for the past 20 years. But somebody who's getting into the market today, into the industry today, into the workforce, in other words, I don't believe they have to be this traditional programmer or developer that they have been in the past. To me, a product manager, a product owner is also a developer, a tester is a developer, a B2B salesperson is a developer. I mean, would you agree that more people can become developers in the near future?
150%. 150%. I think, in fact, our development team, most of our development team did not go to school to be developers. Most of our development team are in second careers, actually. They did other things. And that's partially what makes them so valuable is like they actually understand business and business requirements. And so when we're working on things, like, yeah, they understand the tools, but AI helps them a lot with like the syntax of those things. But because they understand the problems, like they're just much better. Maybe better is the wrong word. They're very capable, even though they didn't go to school for development, because their experiences outside of code um, help them to approach the world in a very like concrete way that they understand like real problems. And so we come up with really, I think, interesting solutions.
So should we be worried as developers? Like,
No, no. Well, I mean, I guess depends. Lazy developers should be like, I think if you're, and I think those developers that always take too long to produce, basic features, uh, yeah, they probably should be. But like that's true for anybody in the workforce all the time, right? Like people that are generally not competent should always be a little bit worried. I think that the median developer though, like this is a heyday, man. I love it. Like I haven't built that. I don't code that much anymore. Um, but I got really excited about smart sites, and so I got more done in the 3 months that I was like, spending on coding with smart sites than I did in like 5 years, like 5 years ago. It was it's fantastic. And so for the people that are like sharp and curious and creative, like this is like a golden age in my opinion.
Beautiful, right? And I think we'll probably wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so. I have a lot more questions to you. I'm going to hit you up again. We'll do it in a
Please do.
quieter environment. Just want to make sure people can hear everything, right? Just so that I want to come to a closure here. Couple of
Yeah.
things before we get there. You mentioned websites at the top of our call, where agents are going to start interacting with these websites before it becomes agent to agent entirely. An AI agent is going to be interacting with these websites, right? Hey Jesse, if you don't mind muting yourself while I ask the question, just
Yep.
yep, perfect. That way, at least Yep. So here's my question, essentially, right? So you mentioned agents are going to be using these websites till it becomes agent to agent. Now, I think two questions there. One is traditionally we've been designing websites, like if you're a UI UX designer, you're doing it with humans in mind. You never did that with agents in mind. Now, I don't know if we can start completely ditching or dumping humans, whatever the right word is, in favor of agents, because like you mentioned, it's going to take a little bit of time for that to happen in entirety. So in the near term to short term, if I'm a UX UI designer, somebody is watching our podcast or listening to it, they've been in the business of doing UI and UX design. How should they approach this? I feel like it should be not organically different. I feel like it needs to be seismically different. Tell me if you agree, or whether you agree or disagree. Tell me how you think that they should approach this problem.
Yeah, this is a great question. So I will say this. I think that in the near term, um, more minimalist is better. Partially because a lot of things again that we take for granted as humans, carousels, motion content, animations, things like that, which like catch human eyes, they AIs won't see or perceive them. And so I think we're going to start. I think if I'm a UX person, first of all, again, like I think humans and AIs are going to coexist, right? So I don't think it's going to be that it's going to be all one or all the other. They're going to coexist. But I do think that moving towards minimalism, removing things that require like the thing what I call on our team, I call cute design, getting rid of cute designs like carousels and motion and things like that are just designed to like get your attention. Like hey, AI is first of all AI is not going to wait for those things to load, and secondly like they're not going to perceive it well. So I would start to reduce those things in favor of much more simple designs like cards with really strong color, really strong contrasts, really clean typography. I think that's one part. I think the other is I think we need to be thinking about how we want to design websites around customer journeys when you can put conversation in the interface. What I mean by that is if you think about a traditional store, let's say I walk into a Nordstrom, for example, right? Let's imagine that Nordstrom just had signage. There's the shoes, there's the women's clothes, there's the men's clothes, and that was it. There's not a single person at all. And it's up to me. I walk into Nordstrom and there's thousands of products in Nordstrom, and I've got to go figure out whether or not they've got this blue jacket for men in size 40 regular. Like that's kind of a pain in the neck, right? Like I'd have to like figure out, okay, where is it? Like find the signage, walk to the area, figure out, okay, where are the men's coats? Okay, no, there's the men's coats. Do they have my size? Like, think about the amount of work I have to do to be an expert at Nordstrom's floor plan in that environment. That's how we build websites, right? Because we've never been able to build websites in a way that's truly interactive. So we come up with the cute navigations and we try and figure out what call to action and how to put together a sitemap. We do a lot of work to try and guess and help. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're giving somebody Nordstrom and being like, hey, you figure it out. You've got to be an expert at my website. But when you can add conversation, so now imagine Nordstrom's able to put somebody in each of these departments. So when I first come in, there's a greeter who's like, where would you like to go? And I'm like, I'm looking for a men's coat. And they're like, okay, go over there. And so I walk over there. I get to the men's coat, and the person says to me, which I'm going to measure you. Okay, you're 40 regular. Okay, great. What are you looking for a coat for? Are you looking for everyday wear? Or are you looking for formal wear? Oh, you're looking for everyday wear? Come over here. Okay, we've got these different colors. Like, you think about how those interactions happen in real life. Let's say in like a real retail store. Like, with UX in the future, like conversational interfaces, you can build that. So I don't need to now guess where people are. What I need to do is I need to provide appropriate questions, appropriate signage, and then start conversation. So you need to be really clear on the journey, and you need to start figuring out where do you put the breadcrumbs, and then where do you let conversations take over. And I think that's where UX is going to start changing a lot.
Jesse, great example, and fantastically explained, right? And I say this because you read my mind there. The reason I asked the UI UX question was to literally follow that up with this conversational interface question, but I don't have that question anymore because you already answered that. So can we then say that the design systems that companies have in place, they're going to have to change, right? We've spent a lot of time, whether you're a React developer or whatever else you've been using to develop, we're used to a design system. We've been able to reuse those components. We've talked language that was very specific to humans per se. But based on what you mentioned there, carousels and a lot of these noisy quote unquote interfaces are going to have to be gone. So it's almost like a Tesla, right? When you sit in a Tesla, it's very, you don't have too many things happen. Now you may like it, you may not like it, right? For n number of reasons, right? Outside of Musk, and I'm just talking about the car in itself, right? Some people like buttons, they don't like the haptic buttons. Some like physical buttons. The humans we all have opinions, but it's hard to argue. that when you enter, step into a Tesla, it's a whole lot cleaner and simpler to use and maneuver than a car with 200 buttons, or like a remote control that we had, like with 300 buttons. Still, Apple said you can have a simple Apple TV remote with like 4 buttons, right? Do you, I mean, is it fair to say that the UI should be more like a reflection of the experience in a Tesla? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think less is going to be more, right? I would start to think about, breadcrumbs. Like, just how do you start to, and I don't mean breadcrumbs in a UI standpoint. I mean it like from a journey standpoint. How do you like figure out where the start of the journey is, and then just provide enough like small, ways for somebody to just start a conversation? Because once the AI is able to take over, once the agent takes over in the conversational interface, then it's up to the user to figure out where they want to go. And that's what's so powerful. That's why OpenAI grew so quickly, is because, maybe I have, a computer science degree. And so I'm going to ask different questions than somebody who's learning from, who's coming, approaching from, a novice, the perspective of a novice. And both of us can use the same interface for the same conversation. But what's going to change is the conversation is going to be different, because you're going to ask questions about, design patterns and, you know, classes or whatever, object orientation, instantiation. Like, you're going to ask about these things, whereas like I might be like, how does code work, right? But we could both have that same conversation in an interface. And so yeah, I think it's going to be more about um, thinning out design in order, and moving towards minimalism in order to let the conversation take over. And it's going to be take a little bit of a leap of faith, because we're going to have to like trust that our agents are going to be able to do as good a job, if not better job, than we were with our landing page design.
Perfect, right? I just have a couple of more questions for you before we can call it wraps. And the last one is a non-technical question. But before I ask those, Jesse, as we get to the tail end of this, do you have any questions for me? And then I'm going to ask the two questions I have for you.
No, Krisha, you asked me some really great questions. There are a lot of things you asked me that I'm like, man, I haven't even thought about that before. So I'm really, I can't wait to see this recording and then put it in our agent and have the agent come up with a list of your questions, because I feel like not only will it give me a lot more content, but it'll actually, I'll take it to our development team, be like, hey, here's a lot of really good questions that we should really think about.
No worries. And then we'll pick up from where we left off, hopefully, as we continue this conversation, right? So the last two questions for you. One is the non-technical question. Maybe I can ask, it doesn't matter which order, that's typically my very last question. But before that, my other question was, you're in San Francisco right now. You said you live in Michigan. I live a few miles west of Washington, D.C. So we are living in what I want to believe is the best country in the world. We're not perfect, but we are probably the best nation. At least it's my opinion. Uh, we are, I was at a conference, like I mentioned to you last week, where there's a lot of discussion with the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and there was a phenomenal set of conversations. Here is what I took away from that we are making a ton of progress as a country. AI is here to stay. It's not hype, even if some people want to believe it's hype. It's nowhere near that. In fact, a lot of them mentioned that there's a 40% of the companies are starting to see a return on investment on their AI investments, right? Because every time Google, Alphabet, or Meta go to their earnings calls, the concern has typically been the capex spend. Oh, you're going to spend $90 billion on AI. Are you getting revenue or money out of that? People are starting to believe that it's actually generating revenue. Now, that is context, but here is my question to you. There was a lot of talk even in the conference last week, just about China and the US and then India, a lot of the countries where a lot of this work is actually happening. A ton of work is happening in China, right? But that's not true of a lot of the other countries in the world. I think there's like 195 countries in the world, if I'm not wrong. A lot of this conversation last week was around the US, China, a little bit of Europe, India, right? A few countries and maybe a continent here or there. But that's not the rest of the world. And forget even the rest of the world. When I go to some stores here, I look at the products that these people are using. It was built like 20 years ago, and I interact with the people at the store. They're like, "Yep, if you can build something better, it'd be great because this is very dated." I give you these two examples before I ask this question, which is, on one side, you hear of AI agents, agentic AI, things changing, machines taking over everything. And then you feel like there's another part of the world where things are not changing anywhere close to the pace at which we are having this conversation here. So my question to you is is there a disconnect, a complete disconnect, or or you think I'm exaggerating here?
That's a huge question. I don't think you're exaggerating. So we have team members all over the world. We have several team members in Argentina, so in Latin America. We have team members in the Philippines. We have team members in Uganda and in Africa. And the yeah, we all we sometimes it feels like we all might as well live on a different planet. Um, there's absolutely there's absolutely outsized paces in some places. Having said that, what's so great about these kinds of technologies is that they will create opportunities for maybe some of these other countries to catch up faster because they can leapfrog things that, like the 25-year-old infrastructure. You probably worked on this on kind of projects with legacy systems before. Like it's oftentimes much more difficult to navigate legacy systems and start new, but you also can't like throw out legacy systems because there's a lot of stuff that's typically built on top of them, right? That whereas some of these other parts of the world will be able to start new, and I tend to think that that's going to be a really interesting opportunity. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think you're exaggerating at all. I think it's outsized returns in certain areas of the world.
Makes sense, right? This is amazing. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared here. I really enjoyed this conversation. My very last question to you, Jesse, is again the non-technical one, which is, what is your favorite food? And if it's not something all of us might understand, you're going to have to explain that.
Oh man, that's a great question. So I am from Texas. Even though I live in Michigan, I'm in San Francisco. I'm from Texas, and so I really love steak. I really love brisket, whether it's pork or beef. Although in Texas it's mostly beef, beef brisket. So basically any kind of meat is pretty good. But probably steak is my favorite.
And which part of Texas?
I grew up in Houston, but I've lived in Houston, Dallas, and Austin.
I came to the US, to Houston. I studied at University of Houston. That's where I came. I lived there for a little over 2 years before I moved to the East Coast. So wow,
Go
small world,
Cougars!
small world there, right?
My
And
mom went to University of Houston.
oh, she did. And you mentioned, I'm borderline vegan but vegetarian, so I may not understand the whole description, but I actually do understand what you said better than I would have, because I watched Young Sheldon yesterday. Uh, and there's an episode on brisket where the mother-in-law doesn't give the Mima doesn't she doesn't give the recipe. I don't know if you've seen that. It was hilarious. So when you said Texas and brisket and that, it was like I watched it last night, so it's very fresh in my mind. So it's I can be less ignorant about this whole thing.
I
Yeah,
love that. That is
yeah,
fantastic. I love
which is
it.
amazing. Anything else as closing comments, Jesse, before we call it wraps?
No, I'm super super grateful for the time that you shared with us here, and I'm sorry for all of the background noise. I was not expecting to still be traveling, but
No
all
worries.
the legacy systems of the airlines, right? I ended up delayed, and I did not want to have to reschedule this. But I really hope we get to do this again in my office with the nice setup, as opposed to in a cafe in the middle of San Francisco. But I will say this: I feel like it gives a little bit of extra flavor because like I'm here, like I'm at a
No,
conference
it
where
does. Actually,
these
I
these
agree.
things
It
are.
does.
I just came off this conference where everybody's talking about these things, and I'm getting ready to go back to Michigan and be like, guys, like, hey, there's this whole world happening. To your point about this disparity, like, there's this universe. It is coming very, very quickly, and we have to be prepared for it.
Yeah, no, actually, I agree. It's kind of, we talked about the disparity of two different worlds. Sometimes you have a nice fancy room, and then sometimes you have these pipes that you can see at the back. So it's kind of funny, but it's very nice actually. It's With that, Jesse, I would love to continue this conversation. I have a lot more to ask. Maybe when we meet the next time, we can pick up from where we left off. Folks, again, this was Jesse Flores, who is founder of Super Web Pros. I'll include the link to Jesse's company and the LinkedIn profile, so definitely do reach out. And if there's other links you want for us to include, Jesse, I'm more than happy to do it. This is amazing. I can't wait to sort of publish it and see what questions other people have as well, so we can take this forward. Anything else before I hit stop recording?
No, I appreciate this so much. Thank you, and I look forward to connecting with anyone that wants to reach out.
Absolutely. And just stay for a couple of seconds after I hit stop. Yep. So thanks, Jesse. Folks, that's it for today from Snowpal Polyglot Software Development Podcast. Talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.